Scaling app downloads with Apple Search Ads. So a couple of interesting facts before we begin. Within the Apple Search Ads website, they state that 70% of App Store visitors use the search result tab to find their next app to download, which I can believe. And search results ads tend to have a 60% conversion rate from click to app install, although I think that's for branded keywords. Also interesting to know that generally speaking, iOS users tend to have a stronger lifetime value compared to Android. I'm not sure why. Having an Apple Search Ads campaign, if you're a mobile-based company, is a no-brainer, especially if you're looking for more app downloads, user acquisition, and a brand awareness play. You have to use Apple Search Ads. While the platform itself is very limited in terms of its capabilities, at least in comparison to Google Ads, and that's mainly because Google Ads have been around for a longer time, it's just had more time to build its product. Apple Search Ads does have a lot of merit, right? There's a lot more iOS users. Again, as mentioned earlier, there tends to be a stronger lifetime value with iOS users. Apple Search Ads by itself is actually a very strong performance marketing channel. All right, so what is Apple Search Ads specifically? So Apple Search Ads is an ad network that helps you promote your app within Apple's App Store specifically, so it's iOS exclusive. You can't promote Android apps within the Apple App Store. There's 4 different ad types, which we'll touch on in a couple of seconds, but the main type of ad placement you're going to be focusing on is the search results ad placement, which basically helps users find the right app by the keyword that they type within the search results tab within the App Store. So it's a very intent-driven ad placement, very similar to Google Search and Microsoft Search. Whenever we use those platforms, right, we have a very high intent that needs to be met. So that could be us researching for a specific product we want to study, we want to learn a specific type of information, or maybe it's just us generally surfing the web, if people still use that term. But long story short, there's an intent needed to be met, so you tend to get better conversion rates within these type of ad placements or these type of ad networks, because there's less friction from the person seeing the ad and clicking on the ad, especially if it's relevant to the need that they have within that exact moment. As mentioned earlier, Apple Search Ads has 4 different ad types, which we'll touch on now. So when you first create your Apple Search Ads account and you start, the first one is the Today tab. So the Today tab is basically a banner ad that shows up immediately after a user opens the Apple App Store. So the great thing about it is that it takes about 40 to 50% of the screen real estate. It's the type of ad that people can't ignore. So there's a brand awareness play to it. If your vertical as a business is in a highly regulated market like finance, gambling, you're not allowed to advertise using the Today tab, unfortunately, because first is you have to be approved by Apple, and second is you have to be chosen by Apple. So there's a lot of friction there in even getting a Today tab ad placement. But in short, it's basically a banner ad or a display ad within the App Store. It takes a massive real estate of the screen. The next ad placement is called Search tab. So this is interesting because it's the type of ad that shows up before the search happens, right? A user opens the App Store, they click on search. So if you look at the screen right now, you'll see that the last segment says suggested. So these are basically ads, more specifically a search tab. So the good thing to know about this type of ad placement is that it's very algorithmic, and Apple's going to use your app category and metadata in order to show these type of ad placements. So there's not a lot of control and flexibility within this ad placement. Third is where you're likely going to spend 90% of your time and efforts within Apple Search Ads, and that is called the search results ad placement. And that's basically similar to what a Google search ad is. It's when a user searches for a specific keyword, your ad will show up immediately upon that user clicking on search. So if you look at the screen right now, you'll clearly see that a good 30% of the screen real estate shows an ad. The way you show ad impressions is obviously targeting the keywords that your potential users will search for within the App Store. Finally, the fourth and final Apple Search Ads ad type or ad placement is called product pages. Product pages is very identical to search tab, where your ad will show up at the bottom of the screen of the App Store. The only difference is that the ad placement only shows up when a user clicks on a specific app. So they actually go to the product page listings of that specific app and they scroll all the way down. If you look at the screen right now, you'll see that there's a segment where it says you might also like, which is just another term for suggested apps. I find that a lot of users don't tend to scroll past 50% of any product page listings. And I justify that by saying that I'm both an iOS and Android user. I have 2 phones, and whenever I click on an app in their listing, I never scroll all the way to the bottom of the page unless for research purposes. So now let's discuss the things that you need in order to launch your first Apple Search Ads campaign. So the first thing is that you need your app released within the App Store. Obviously, if you're going to promote the app, you need to have it released. The next thing you need ideally is a group of keywords that you want to target. It could be segmented by a specific theme. A typical theme breakdown that you might have is a group of branded keywords, a group of competitor keywords, a group of high intent driven keywords, and then maybe more of a self-exploratory or miscellaneous keyword segment. That's very hard to pronounce. And then the next thing you need is ideally you also have a mobile measurement partner or MMP. You could use a platform like AppsFlyer, Kochava, Adjust. Although one thing to keep in mind, because Apple Search Ads is a native product by Apple, you'll automatically be able to see your app event pushed out to Apple Search Ads, specifically the install event, but any other custom event after the app install won't be shown, hence why you need an MMP or a mobile management partner. The next things you need are fairly obvious. You obviously need to set up an Apple Search Ads account. You need to be able to integrate your Apple Store Connect account as well. And then you fill in your company details, your billing details, the usual admin tasks you need when setting up an account. And then finally, if you're wondering, do I need creatives or ad copy for advertising within Apple Search Ads? The answer is no. So the great thing about Apple Search Ads is that it's automatically going to scrape all the creatives and metadata that you have within your product page listing. Hence, launching an Apple Search Ads campaign, it's fairly quick and easy. Thank you, Apple. So I'm going to share my screen now and let's actually build an Apple Search Ad campaigns from the ground up. All right, so once you've created your Apple Search Ads account, the first thing you'll do, as obvious as it sounds, is click Create Campaign. So within this segment, Apple Search Ads automatically going to scrape the app that you have integrated within your Apple Store Connect account. There's no way of you promoting another app, so don't worry about that. So click on that text option, type the first letter of your app, should show up in this case, and then you'll see all the different ad placement options you have. For now, let's just click on search results. You choose the country that you're advertising in. And again, this is important in terms of when we start building multiple campaigns, especially if you're a global based app, you'd want to have specific naming conventions or specific taxonomy for your campaign names and ad group names. Click on UK, click on continue. Campaign name, right? So there's loads of different ways to name a campaign. I'm going to name it as cleanly as possible. Since this will be a campaign preferably always on, I'm going to call it always on United Kingdom, and then I'll type in search results, which is the type of ad placement it is. I'm going to add in UK because we're targeting the UK, and then let's just say this is a branded keyword campaign, so let's call it brand. Daily budget, this is how much you want to spend per day on average. Let's just put a random number, 50. You can also add negative keywords. More, that's for another video. These are the keywords that you feel like you've spent money on, but it's not really doing well for you in terms of a return on investment. Or it might be keywords that people search for that isn't quite relevant to your app's proposition. Start and end date, again, because this is an always on campaign, there is no end date, and the start date is whenever we can launch the campaign, so we'll leave that empty. Ad group name, so this is going to be interesting. Let's call it brand. Your max CPT is basically your max cost per click. Now you'll see that Apple does suggest a specific number. I tend to go with my gut feeling, just go pretty standard with just £1 or €1 if you're based in Europe, and we'll let the data decide. If we find that we have a better return on investment with a lower cost per tap, then we'll obviously lower this number down. But you got to keep in mind, advertising is an auction. If you pay more for a cost per tap or a better cost per acquisition, you'll tend to get better ad impressions. So we're going to leave that. Again, you'll see a segment here called CPA cap. So this is basically Apple asking you how much are you willing to pay on average for an actual conversion. This should really be called CPI cap, which stands for cost per install cap. Again, if we don't have that data, I wouldn't add any random number here, and it's going to, again, even Apple is saying it's going to limit your impressions. So we'll leave that blank for now. Search match is basically Apple's way of showing your ads to relevant users using your app's metadata as targeting. So rather than adding in keywords, you actually let Apple's algorithm automatically show ad impressions to who they think the right user is. So it's basically an equivalent of a Google Ads dynamic search ads, where you don't need to add specific keywords. You can target users by adding in a specific URL, and then Google will scrape the URL and find relevant keywords that it thinks it's gonna work for that specific bid strategy that you're optimizing for. In this case, I would have this as a separate campaign, and I will switch this off. And if I were to test this out, it would be a separate campaign with a separate dedicated budget. All right, so keywords. So we're going to add keywords to this ad group, and we know that it's a branded campaign. So whatever your brand name is, brand, again, we're just testing this out. We'll call it branded. So the unfortunate thing with Apple Search Ad is that you have to manually type in the keywords, or you can copy and paste it as long as it's separated by a comma. You can't upload a CSV, which is kind of annoying, but hopefully Apple will start working on that. So let's say you've added a few keywords segmented by a comma. You click on add, you'll see your keywords here. If you've had prior campaigns live within Apple Search Ads, you'll see Apple actually recommend a couple of keywords. For the most part, ignore this segment for now. It's great for ideation purposes, but we'll ignore it for now. Within this segment of the user interface, you'll see the keywords that you've added. You'll see the popularity. You can have specific bids for specific keywords. For now, we obviously chose £1. And then finally, you can choose the match type. So there's only really two match types. There's exact and broad. The difference is that if we choose exact match, what that means is you're only going to show ad impressions for that specific keyword that the user searches for. On the other hand, if we choose broad, what Apple Search Ads is going to do is show ad impressions to keywords related to that keyword we're targeting. So in this case, let's say we were targeting the word shoes and I choose the broad match type. If someone searches for running shoes or it searches for trainers, your ad is likely going to show up because it's a term related to shoes. So for a branded campaign, 90% of the time, you're going to be using an exact match type. Let's leave it there for now. Click on save. In the audience segment, for the most part, I would leave this as is. We want to reach all eligible users. So if we do click on choose specific audiences, let's just briefly run through some of those parameters. Devices, obviously it's going to be iPhone. Customer types, all users, new users, users of my other apps, returning users. So if you want to have a campaign dedicated to retargeting or re-engaging past users, you might obviously use returning users. If you have other apps and you want to be able to retarget those users, you might use the users of my other apps segment. But 90% of the time, you'd want to target all users, even the ones who have already installed your app, because they might have installed the app. But that's a topic for another day. Let's keep it at all users. Demographics, I mean, this is very contextual. You can only really advertise to someone who's over the age of 18. So the minimum age range is going to be 18. If you feel like there's a specific age range you want to target, you can do that. But generally speaking, again, this is very contextual. I would just leave that as is for now. Same thing with the gender. So the location segment, since we've already chosen United Kingdom, we'll leave this as is. It will automatically only show our ads to the UK. Unless you want to target specific cities or states, you would switch that off and type in the specific city or state. So let's say if I type in London here, I can target that specific city. But in this case, we'll leave it as is. Ad scheduling is basically Apple asking you if you want to show your ads on a specific day or in a specific time. I would never advise doing this, especially in 2023. Next up is creative. So again, you would leave this at default. Apple is automatically going to use the creatives that you have within your product page listings. If you want to A/B test different creatives, you'll have to set this up via Apple Store Connect. Once you log in there, you'll have a product page optimization portion, and then you can add in a variant of the current product page listings that you have. You can A/B test app icons, you can A/B test feature graphics, screenshots, and videos. And then finally, you click create campaign, and voila, that's your campaign ready to go. And it should be live within a couple of minutes. And actually, if you look at the screen right now, you can see that specific campaign is already running. So this is obviously a test campaign, so I'm going to remove this campaign. Cool. On to the next bit. So whenever we talk about Apple Search Ads and its performance, you're always going to have two sources of truth. The first source of truth will obviously be from Apple Search Ads, the platform itself, but it's very limited in the types of data that you'll see. The only actual conversion you'll be able to see is your app install, and obviously the KPIs that come with that, whether that's a conversion rate, tap through rate, or the advertising spend. Your second source of truth, which I highly recommend implementing, is a mobile measurement partner, or an MMP. Again, some of the platforms you can use are AppsFlyer, Kochava, and Adjust. They all do the same thing. And within your MMP, you can really start to track down and attribute any post-install event. And the reason why that's valuable is you might find that you have a segment of keywords that bring you a lot of app installs, but you actually find that those users don't actually become paying users. Whereas you might have keywords that don't bring you a lot of app installs, but the quality of that app install is very high. There might be a lot more paying users for specific segments of keywords. Ideally, you have as many sources of truth as possible. For this specific use case, you'll have Apple Search Ads, your mobile measurement partner, and then you can cross-reference that with the data that you see within your internal database. So honing in on the aspect of mobile measurement partner or app analytics, what do you actually need to track? So your app installs are automatically going to be tracked by your MMP, but only if it's an organic install. So we want to be able to track non-organic app installs as well. We want to be able to track if a user actually registers for an account, if they complete that whole process. So that's one event in itself. You want to be able to track your standard advertising KPIs. You also want to be able to track any custom in-app events. And again, that's going to be very contextual and dynamic to your type of business, but it could be someone completing a registration. It could be someone clicking on a specific call to action button. Maybe it's someone adding in their credit card details or adding a specific item to a basket. If your vertical is within the e-commerce space, it might be someone purchasing or subscribing if you're a subscription-based app. And another KPI that you'll need to track, and this is going beyond an MMP, you want to be able to track your organic rankings for specific keywords. You'll unfortunately need a third-party software for this, but the one that I personally use is AppRadar. So I'd go and check them out. I'm going to leave a link in the summary section below. If it's your first time setting up an Apple search ads campaign, you're probably going to be overwhelmed by the vast amount of KPIs or metrics that you can see within the column section. Let's briefly talk about some of those metrics and what they actually mean. The first one is a tap, which really is just a click, right? The terminology that Apple uses is tap for some reason, but it essentially means a click. So a tap is basically a click on a phone screen. An impression or ad impression is when a user sees your ad. An install, I'm pretty sure you know what that is. A CPT, which stands for cost per tap, is also the same as a CPC, cost per click. How much you pay when a user actually clicks on your ad. The formula is spend divided by click, or spend divided by tap. The next metric you want to be aware of is CPM, or cost per mil. This is how much you pay per 1,000 ad impressions. The formula used is spend divided by ad impressions times 1,000. That's your CPM. Next is CPA, which stands for cost per acquisition. You can also call it CAC, CAC, customer acquisition cost. If you're a B2B app, you might call it CPL, cost per lead. Let's call it CPA just to be focused. So a CPA is how much you pay per conversion. And in this case, because it's an app-based campaign, it's how much you pay per app install. The formula is spend divided by app install. TTR stands for tap through rate. Another term for this is CTR, click through rate. It's simply percentage of the people that click in your ad divided by the amount of people who've actually seen your ad or ad impressions. So the formula is clicks divided by ad impressions as a percentage. That's going to be your tap through rate. Finally, CR or CVR stands for conversion rate. This is the metric that tells you as a percentage how many people have installed the app in comparison to the people who have clicked on your ad. The formula is app install divided by link clicks or taps as a percentage, and that's going to be your conversion rate for an app install. So you've launched your Apple Search Ads campaign, it's running well, you understand some of the KPIs and how to analyze your data. Let's now talk about potential ways to optimize your campaign or growth hacks you can use to improve your performance. The first one is called product page optimization. This is basically a way for you to A/B test different types of creatives so you can understand which variation or screenshots or app icons can get you better click-through rates or conversion rates. So the way to test this is you need your Apple Store Connect account and you need to be able to upload different variants of your creatives within the product page optimization aspect within Apple Store Connect. The next optimization tip I have for you is testing out the different match types for your keywords currently. So let's say it's branded keywords, you might have a separate campaign or ad group for broad match type, and then you'll have a variation of that same exact keyword, but this time as an exact match. And what you'll find is that you'll very likely have different KPIs for each, even though they're the same exact keyword. To be transparent, it's very likely that your exact match keywords are going to give you better KPIs. Again, you want to validate that by actually testing that. Although my advice is obviously to always validate your hypothesis. So if you find that exact match type keywords tend to give you better KPIs, like better conversion rates, better cost per taps or cost per clicks, it might be worth having a separate campaign and a dedicated budget for those type of match types. Another optimization tip is testing out search match. So this is before you even create a campaign, you'll have to switch on the search match functionality. It's very similar to what a dynamic search ad is within Google Ads. How search match works is that Apple's going to show ad impressions using your app's metadata to users that it think it's relevant for. So it's basically a way for you to understand what potential search terms are people typing in to eventually land on your product page or listing or when they install the app. I'd recommend having this as a separate campaign and having a separate testing budget for this app. And then eventually once you have the campaign launched, maybe you'll scour the top 10 or 20 keywords that are bringing you the best KPIs. So the next tip I have, which is very contextual and very dependent upon the vertical that you're in, is having a separate campaign targeting your competitors. The reason why I think targeting your competitor keywords is a great optimization tip is because you're able to steal some of the market share that your competitor has already built up, right? You're stealing some of their equity in a sense, because if someone searches for your competitor and they see your ad, which I'm assuming is a very similar proposition to what they do, you're essentially showing higher quality ad impressions, right? And that's the name of the game. You want to be able to advertise and show ad impressions to quality users, right? It's not just about gaining as many ad impressions. It's about getting as many quality ad impressions. If you have any questions regarding the platform, or if you're startup looking to focus on mobile app growth, or maybe you just want to talk about digital marketing growth in general, I'm going to leave my personal LinkedIn in the summary section below. Thank you for watching the video. Until next time, peace.